This is a devolved piece of legislation. It doesn't impinge on the Equalities Act in a material way. And I think really for people in Scotland in particular, it's quite a shocking thing that when we have an election campaign, when we have a democratic outcome, when we elect a parliament, a government, and yet Westminster can say no. This is an important test case, as you just heard, because what's at the heart of this is that this is a bill that wasn't just introduced into the Scottish Parliament, it was actually passed by the Scottish Parliament by a overwhelming majority of MPs. MPs right across parties, Scottish National Party, Green, Labour, Lib Dem, even some Tories. And actually, if I go back to the last election campaign in Scotland, the SNP, the Greens, the Lib Dems, and the Labour Party had this as a manifesto commitment. Theresa May used to want to bring in this legislation in the rest of the UK as well. And the key question is that a bill which has been passed by the Scottish Parliament, supported by the vast majority of MPs, manifesto commitment of a majority of the parties. And here we have Westminster, through the Secretary of State for Scotland, turning round and saying that he thinks that he can block a piece of legislation of the Scottish Parliament. Now, let's remember that when we had our independence debate, the referendum in 2014, we were told that the Scottish Parliament was to be respected. How can we have the Scottish Parliament being respected when the UK government is using a big stick like this? And it's not just about this individual bill, because it's that power that Westminster has on any occasion, on any piece of legislation, to turn round to the Scottish Parliament and saying, we're saying no, this legislation is not going to get royal assent. That's an extraordinary set of circumstances in the devolutionary settlement that Westminster believes that it can behave in such a way. It is anti-democratic. This is a devolved piece of legislation. It doesn't impinge on the Equalities Act in a material way. And I think really for people in Scotland in particular, it's quite a shocking thing that when we have an election campaign, when we have a democratic outcome, when we elect a parliament, a government, and yet Westminster can say no, because that's in essence what has happened in this particular case.
I mean, the Westminster governor said it would have an adverse impact on the way the Equalities Act worked across the UK. And just to quote the Prime Minister directly, he said the decision to use the powers to be made after taking very careful and considered advice. We'll have to see how this plays out. In the meantime, Ian, one question might be, is this the right fight for the SNP right now?
Well, just on the statement of reasons that's been referred to, it's pretty thin stuff. But it is that fundamental point. How is devolution supposed to work? If you've got a situation at Westminster, at any occasion can say no, not just to the Scottish Parliament, but to the Scottish people that have sent their MSPs legislating on devolved areas, we have got no choice but to tackle this, because it is that point of principle that we should have the right to determine our own laws in domestic areas ourselves. And I would simply say to people of Scotland, if you want to stop Westminster interfering in our devolved competencies, then ultimately the only way to do that is by Scotland becoming an independent country and stop somebody like Alistair Jack. And let's remember, the Tories have lost every election in Scotland since 1955, yet the Secretary of State for Scotland has this power to unilaterally block legislation of the Scottish Parliament. It's something that's simply not acceptable.
Yeah, I wonder how much power the SNP actually wields right now in just terms of getting support from the people who voted for it. Do you think it's lost its reputation for competent governance?
We've just obviously come through an election contest for a new leader and a new First Minister, and I firmly believe that Humza Yousaf will demonstrate that he is the right person to be leading our country. And of course, the SNP's won the last 8 elections in Scotland. Of course, nothing is forever, and we will only be re-elected if we demonstrate that we are a competent government, that we're worthy of the trust of the people. I believe that we will absolutely demonstrate that between now and the next election, show that we can deliver across health, across education, and so many other areas. And I think importantly, when we're talking about coming through the post-COVID period, when we're talking about the cost of living crisis, to have the economic agenda that will put Scotland back to work, drive investment into the economy, drive up living standards, and in particular benefit from the enormous opportunities that we have in green energy in Scotland. So yes, we will show the appropriate leadership, and I trust and hope that the people of Scotland will once again, whether it's the Westminster election or the next Scottish election, put their faith and trust in the SNP.
But if we just look at the very latest, just the financial difficulties surrounding the party. On Tuesday, Humza Yousaf revealed that the auditors quit 6 months ago, a fact that none of the leadership contenders were made aware of. It's shoddy at best.
Look, I think, as I've said, we've faced a challenging time. There is a police investigation which is ongoing, so let's see what happens when we get to the summation of that. But it's quite normal for any organisation to have a change in its auditors from time to time, and I'm sure that Hamza and the party executive will take the necessary steps to make sure, in a timely manner, that we've got new auditors in place.